Everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Feel Great with Kate podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Bornkamp. As you probably know, I'm a CPA and nutritional therapy practitioner, and I am on a mission to help more high achievers and executives stop trading their health for their wealth and to die young as late in life as possible, because that, at the end of the day, is what we really want. And today I have a good one for you. We are talking about the topic of inflammation, why we should care about it, and how it actually impacts more than you would think, including our waistline and our daily performance at our job and in our life. All right, so let's dive in. I want to start off with a personal story of how I really started to appreciate what inflammation is, how I started to recognize it on my own body, because I think oftentimes when I talk to clients, a lot of people come to me, they want to have better energy, they want to lose weight. Those are two of the most common things I hear. And a lot of the conversations I've had over the last few years, I know that most people are like me 10 years ago, where we don't know what inflammation truly is. And so if you want to lose weight, part of that weight you need to understand is inflammation on your body. Now, this isn't a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. I mean, we want to reduce the inflammation, but I just mean when we want to lose weight, we get so fixated on the number on the scale, but what we really want is to feel good, right? We want to be pain free. We want to be fluid. We also want to look good. We probably want to trim down or look lean. And so, a huge thing I see missed is inflammation on your body is actually causing you to not only age faster, but also to feel pain in the joints, um, puffier around your face, and maybe even swollen over your body. Okay, so I learned this from years ago when I was first exploring and testing out my own nutrition. I did the Whole30 diet. So if you're not familiar, Whole30 is a kind of diet challenge where you go through and you pretty much just eat only whole foods for 30 days. And it's really strict in the sense that you do not eat out at restaurants, you don't have any seed oils, you don't have any additives, and you pretty much need to cook all your own food. So for that reason, I don't recommend it to everyone because it is pretty intense. However, if you're at a point in your life where you can cook all your food, I have never felt better than that time. And so what ended up happening was not only did my energy significantly improve, and by the way, on the Whole30, they actually have you cut out coffee too. And so I think at the time I was like consuming pre-workout regularly, I was consuming coffee regularly, and I remember for my pre-workout, I actually switched it out with black tea. And I was like, is this going to work? I'm going to feel so crappy for my workouts. But I actually had really good energy. And so what ended up happening was after the 30 days, I was weighing myself and I was also measuring, my body as well, like around my waist, around my arms. You guys, I had lost 12 inches in total around my body, which was shocking to me because at the same time, I only lost half a pound of weight on the scale, which wasn't the reason why I did it. I wanted to do it to see how I felt and to see what could change in my nutrition. And so I was really surprised by that of how many inches I lost. And come to find out, majority of that was inflammation. And so again, if you're thinking, "Oh, I have weight to lose," remember that a portion of just the size and the puffiness that you feel when you think of the weight may not necessarily be the weight on the number of the scale. It's actually the inflammation around your body. And I think I remember back around 8 inches or so of that was around my waist, which was absolutely wild to me. And so it goes to show that when we cut out the things that are causing the inflammation, when we eat and do more of the things that help reduce inflammation, you can get pretty dramatic results pretty quickly. And the good news is that it's going to help you feel better. It's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help you look better. So stay tuned for some of those things at the end because I have 5 ways that you can improve your inflammation and reduce your inflammation on a daily basis. All right, let's kind of set the stage by talking about what is inflammation. So it's important to understand that inflammation is a natural process in the body and it's a very protective mechanism. Think about if you were to, cut your finger or you had an injury like a sprained ankle, you would expect that your body would heal it naturally. You're not like willing yourself to do it. And that's the body's natural immune system coming in and healing that acute inflammation, meaning that cut on your finger would eventually scab up and it would probably fall off. And maybe in between it would kind of itch, right? We know this gets a little red, maybe itchy. That's the healing process. Similarly for your ankle, maybe it would swell up initially. That's your body rushing, healing fluids and things to that area. Maybe it would bruise, right? The dead blood cells would bruise. And then eventually it would heal up and the pain would dissipate. that is very normal and natural. However, what we're really talking about here is chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation is when your immune system stays activated and doesn't necessarily shut off. So some specific things we're talking about here are inflammatory markers within the body, specifically what's called inflammatory cytokines. Now, it's not important for you to remember that word necessarily, but what is important is for you to understand that if your body is in a chronic state of inflammation, those things, those compounds in your body are going to be consistently damaging your gut lining, damaging your arterial walls, and damaging your brain and your cells everywhere in your body. And so it's like having low grade inflammation all the time. Your body is continuing to fight itself. And this happens a lot through common things that we expose ourselves to, as we'll get into. But one of the number one things I see is a poor diet that damages the gut lining, and it causes chronic inflammation, which then can contribute to insulin resistance. And then we feel things like fatigue and brain fog. So how do you know if you're inflamed? Well, if you're like me 10 years ago, you might have no idea until you cut everything out and do a really strict diet, but I'm not proposing that. So that's the good news. So how would you know realistically if you were inflamed? Well, if you are living in the US, if you're eating American food, and if you are stressed most of the time, there is a high likelihood that you have inflammation of some degree. Unfortunately, that's just the world we live in right now. And so that makes it even more paramount, even more important that we need to take care and time to understand how we can reduce our inflammation. But some things you can see in your body, some of the symptoms would be things like brain fog and fatigue. You can also see things physically like swelling of your arms, puffy face, maybe when you wake up. That's oftentimes when I see it sometimes, is I notice it more the first thing in the morning, puffy face, puffy under eyes, just sort of feeling joint pain, achy, maybe your knees hurt, your hips hurt. They just kind of a low grade ache, maybe like a 4 out of 10 intensity of the pain. Joint pain is definitely a sign of inflammation, as well as, I already named it, stubborn weight. So this is a huge thing I talk about with my lady clients, because so many times we talk about wanting to lose the quote unquote last 5 to 10 pounds. And I know one executive I spoke to a few years ago was really interested to learn that when we reviewed her blood work, she did have signs of inflammation, and then she went on a healing journey for a couple months and saw great results. She was really impressed and really surprised that she was able to trim down a little bit just by supporting inflammation in her body. And so that's the second piece, is how will you know if you have inflammation? Well, in your blood work, so this is in the same functional blood work that I run for some clients, there are specific blood work markers that we can get a better sense of if your body is showing inflammation or not. A few of those include CRP, cross-reactive protein, the ESR, which is also known as the sedimentation rate, as well as uric acid, and my personal favorite, hemoglobin A1C. We talk a lot about blood sugar, which we'll dive into that a little bit more. But those are a few markers that you can look at on your blood work to know if maybe you are presenting with some inflammation patterns. Huge caveat on the blood work. I've done an episode in the past to explain this. I'm not going to go into it in super detail here, but just know that you need to be assessing your blood work from a functional range perspective, okay? Because if you're just looking at the ranges on your doctor's report, your LabCorp report, those are going to be standard ranges. That's not going to show you your true level of inflammation. That's going to simply show you if you're already at a point of high inflammation. Okay, so go back and listen to that episode if you want to learn more about the differences between functional blood work and conventional blood work. Or if you're ready to get started on your metabolic health journey, I'd love to help you out. So reach out and we can get your blood work done from a functional perspective, and I'd be happy to help order that for you. All right, so moving into why should we care, right? So now we've learned about what is inflammation, how we know if we're inflamed. Let's talk about why we should care. Okay, first and foremost, the number one thing is that inflammation can actually age you faster than your genetics. Inflammation can age you faster than your genetics. There's a term for this in the scientific community now. It's being called inflammaging, which I think is cute. I think it's gets your attention, right? Because you're like, oh crap, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want that to be my life. So what can I do about it, Caitlin? Because the reality is you could be the age of 40, but be biologically aged 50 because of high inflammation in your body. And as we now know, inflammaging is chronic inflammation, and it is the primary driver of aging and disease. This is huge, you guys, because what this means is that if we understand this, we can support our body in order to be healthier and have that goal, like I mentioned at the beginning, which is to die young as late in life as possible. I love that. According to Harvard Medical School, we now know that 60% of chronic diseases are driven by inflammation. This includes heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune conditions, all rooted in inflammation. And as Dr. Mark Hyman likes to say, inflammation is the root of nearly all chronic disease. If you fix your inflammation, you can fix your health. I love it in his book, Forever Young. He breaks this down into 5 of the root causes of inflammation. It includes a poor diet, high in sugar, processed food, and bad fats. Not surprising there. The second one is gut dysfunction, things like leaky gut or gut dysbiosis. Then things like toxins, including heavy metals, chemicals, and mold. And also chronic stress, which we know increases our cortisol, but what you may not know is that cortisol also is a driver of inflammation internally. And then I like how he includes, as part of his list of inflammation drivers, lack of movement or even too much intense exercise. And again, you probably have felt inflamed before in your life, but what you may not realize is that this chronic low-grade inflammation for weeks, months, even years at a time are the same things that are contributing to less strategic decision-making in your job, maybe some frustration because of lack of memory, poor sleep, so you're not feeling as refreshed each day. Maybe this leads you to feel shorter with your family and friends, or maybe you stop laughing as often as we used to. These are the types of drivers when they feel like they're sort of low level, but they actually end up having a big impact on our productivity and our work, as well as our livelihood, our vitality. So this is really important. Okay, the next part I want to get into is really calling out how high blood sugar is actually a source of hidden inflammation. And what's happening here is that when you have elevated blood sugar, so again, that's going to be high peaks from food, stress, or lifestyle patterns, you are actually ending up causing some slight arterial damage. And so why blood sugar matters is because we know that when we have elevated blood sugar periodically over time, so high blood sugar spikes from either your meals or from stressful events, that elevated blood sugar is actually causing small damages to our arterial lining. Okay. And so what happens then is the body actually sends cholesterol to the arterial wall to patch the damage. And that's why cholesterol on our arterial walls is associated with, something bad, right? With poor heart health, with risk of heart disease, things like that. And so this is the process that will lead to plaque buildup over time. But very important here, we know that cholesterol in itself isn't the bad guy. It's the damage from the high blood sugar. That's the underlying contributing factor there. And so what this means is that your high cholesterol is not from eating your eggs. No, it's from your blood sugar being chronically imbalanced for days, weeks, and years at a time. In that same book, Forever Young, Dr. Mark Hyman does a great job explaining the science of what is happening here. And he calls this glycation. The sugar molecules are actually sticking to the proteins and fats, creating AGEs, appropriately named because they contribute to aging. AGEs stand for advanced glycation end products, and it's those compounds in our arteries that are actually causing the inflammation on the arterial wall. And so what's important here is that glycation isn't just a measure of blood sugar, it's what's actually causing the inflammation. And so this is why it's so critical. You guys have heard me talk about this so much, why balancing our blood sugar is the number one thing that we need to be supporting first. That's the first domino in our nutrition, in our health, and in our longevity. Okay, so that's why I wanted to really tie it in here for the concept of inflammation too, because I see so often when I see somebody's goals, when they come to me again, most common 2 things are I want to have high energy, and Caitlin, I'd like to lose some weight naturally. And it's not surprising when I see their blood work when they have unbalanced blood sugar, they have a really high A1C, maybe above 6 or even above 7 for their hemoglobin A1C. And then at the same time, I'm also seeing higher markers of inflammation, some of those blood work markers I mentioned, as well as high cholesterol levels. It's all tied together. Okay, so let's get into now what are daily actions that you can do in your busy life to reduce and even avoid inflammation altogether. Okay, number 1 is not going to surprise you. The first thing that you can do is to stabilize your blood sugar by eating more protein, eating protein first, and reducing the carbohydrates in your meals in order to lower and slower those blood sugar spikes. Now, if you want help with that, reach out to me, book a call, and we will get your strategy put together for what will make the most sense for you. Because I know when we understand these concepts, easily, it's easy to talk about this in theory, but the work is actually applying this into our daily lives. And that's what I love to help executives and high achievers with. Okay, number 2 thing that we can do daily to reduce and avoid inflammation is to move daily. Even 30 minutes of daily walks has been shown to increase our digestion, reduce leaky gut, and improve circulation. I actually have an entire episode on 10 benefits of exercise that have nothing to do with burning calories, but will actually promote a healthier underlying body to make you more resilient and lower inflammation. So I've linked that episode in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to that. But what we're talking about here in terms of moving daily would be 30 minutes of walking, in the morning, or you maybe wanted to break it up in 2 times if you don't have a block of 30 minutes. Getting an adequate resistance training, but not overtraining. Okay, so adequate resistance training would be defined as 3 times of resistance training with weights, resistance bands, or body weight movements 3 times a week for 30 minutes each. And really important, this is for all you high achievers out there that are just having that productivity mindset, do not overtrain. That's actually a common cause of inflammation. So if you are somebody who is training for a marathon, you've probably experienced this before where, after the second, third, fifth day of training that week, your knees are inflamed, your body hurts. That's a sign that you are causing some of that inflammation. And we need to make sure that we have adequate recovery. So if you're somebody who's not training for a marathon, but your workout patterns are excessive cardio, like an hour of cardio every day or 4 times a week, that's probably too much for your body. And you need to look into some of the cues that your body is telling you. Okay, so I'm not going to get into some of the sports psychology on how you can recover, but just know that chronic cardio, which is what I used to do back in college, can actually contribute to inflammation within our body. And at the same time, I promise the results that you want for better heart health, more lean body, and just feeling strong in your body. It can be achieved by lowering the amount of cardio you're doing and increasing the amount of resistance training in your week. Okay, the third thing that we can do to support inflammation and actually lower inflammation in our body is prioritizing quality sleep, defined by 7 to 8 hours every single night. And in some of my workshops that I talk to teams about, I really emphasize how sleep is not only so wonderful and you feel good when you get it, but it's actually, we need to reframe it because it's one of the most productive things our body is doing. Okay, especially for getting an edge. If you're in a high demand career, if you're somebody like me who likes to just do what you're doing well, you want your performance to be consistent, you want to have reliable memory, you want to speak clearly and eloquently, you need to be getting good sleep. Meaning, stop thinking about sleep as a passive activity or something that feels unproductive and reframe it to be the most productive thing your body is doing. What this means in our life is that we're going to be accosted with inflammatory things on a daily basis. Like I said, if we're living in the US, if we're living in the modern times, fortunately, that's just part of the equation now. And getting the sleep is your body's best defense in order to go in and heal, go in and repair cells and organs, and also give your brain a chance to really heal and repair itself as well. So, what I want you to take away on this one is that sleep is the most productive thing your body can do. And stop thinking about sleep as a negotiable. Stop thinking about sleep as optional. I know I like to say that a lot of accountants and CPAs think of sleep as like that plug. It's like, well, if I have to do more work or if my life is busy, I'll just take away from the sleep amount of sleep that I'm getting each night. No, stop doing that. Okay. Okay. The fourth thing that we can do in order to lower inflammation is eating anti-inflammatory foods. I love this one because it's something that can actually be very delicious. It can be enhancing to our nutrition, and it's something that makes you feel good. And so some of the foods that I list here, you're not going to be surprised by. A lot of them get touted as very healthy already. And so inherently we know that. But what you may not realize is why some of these foods are so healthy. Things like fatty fish, salmon, sardines have high omega 3s, which is an antioxidant within the body. Colorful vegetables actually help us reduce that oxidative stress. And so what this means is that when you eat Eating the rainbow, right? We've heard that before. Eating your vegetables, we've heard that before. But why? This is a huge contributing factor. Is not only do those vegetables have high amounts of nutrients themselves, but part of the nutrients actually act as an antioxidant, meaning they will go and combat and reduce the inflammation that's going on in our body. And my next favorite category of high antioxidant foods to eat is berries. Personally, I think I could live off nuts, chocolate, and blueberries, but hey, that's just me. So some of the best things to eat would be the category of berries. So blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, black raspberries, right? Things that are darker usually have more antioxidants and more nutrient value in general. So kind of keep that in mind. Reach for the dark leafy greens, reach for the dark berries. And especially too, these foods, as you'll also know, help actually with the first one, which is to balance our blood sugar. Okay, so all the foods I just listed are high in nutrition value, low in sugar. Okay, so they have that benefit as well, is that the foods you're choosing to put on your plate are reducing your blood sugar and giving you high antioxidant value as well. Okay, and then the fifth thing that we can do is to stop eating the things that are actually causing the inflammation to begin with. All right. And I want to be, somewhat empathetic here because I know most of us probably know when we're eating the junk food, but at the same time, there are a lot of foods in our modern day nutrition or in our store shelves that I think people falsely think are healthy. And it can be kind of a delicate balance to understand what's truly healthy and what's not because we're up against the marketing of these companies. So, a few rules that you could try for yourself and see how you feel would be to try a gluten free diet or a gluten light diet for 3 weeks. Cut back on most gluten. You don't maybe have to be 100% strict with it, but just see how you feel. I know when I've proposed this to some clients, they actually report feeling a lot better. Brain fog goes away, they start sleeping better, they lose a few pounds, and they just have more vitality throughout their day. It could be as simple as cutting out the gluten. Okay. Or maybe for you, it's actually dairy. So, again, trying things and seeing how your body responds. That's the best advice I can give you because at the end of the day, each of our bodies are different. And while you can test for food sensitivities, the reality is that food sensitivities can change over time based on the integrity of your gut. Meaning, if you are somebody who has high inflammation, you likely have a compromised gut lining, which would mean that you have what I would call sort of artificial food sensitivities at the current moment. So, if you are having a reaction to dairy right now, you may be able to eat dairy 6 months from now once you cut it out and you heal your gut. Okay, so if you want to learn more about that, definitely reach out to me. But why I'm talking about some of these foods like the gluten and the dairy is because they're in foods that are otherwise healthy. Even having something like what people would associate as healthy bread, whole grain bread with lots of seeds. Well, yeah, sure, there's some fiber in there and there's some nutrition from the seeds, but if that bread is actually causing inflammation to your gut, that's going to be starting the cascade of the inflammatory response. Another huge contributor to inflammation, this is without a doubt unquestionable for every single person, is sugar. Okay, so we know that sugar is highly inflammatory within the body. And so I really encourage you to start making some of those simple swaps. And if you are somebody who feels like you consume a lot of, junk food like cookies or crackers or even soda is a very common one, and you feel like it just has a hold on you, I empathize with you. And again, we know that we're up against the entire marketing and the entire, food scientists that work for all these companies. Like, just remember that those foods are specifically engineered, literally engineered to be absolutely delicious. Okay, so it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you can only eat one Oreo and you end up eating the entire sleeve. Like, we all do that, right? That's why I don't keep Oreos in the house. But my point is that if you are somebody who feels like you have specific foods that you know you shouldn't be eating, but you just keep doing it, reach out and we can book a complimentary 15-minute food craving rewiring session. I don't know how long I'm going to continue offering these for, but I'm having so much fun with them because people will come to me and they'll crave soda or they'll crave bread or they'll crave, Ruffles potato chips, salt and vinegar flavor, like very specific foods. And we do this very simple activity and it totally rewires their cravings for it to the tune of they can walk by the candy bowl at work at the office and not even grab a candy bar. Okay. So, again, I encourage you to book a call with me if that is something that you want to help yourself with. And then lastly, another huge category of foods that are actually causing and contributing inflammation within the body are seed oils. And these are in a lot of processed foods. So things like sunflower oil, canola oil, any sort of vegetable oil is going to be highly processed and very, very high in omega-6s. And I know you might hear the word omega and think, oh, well, that's healthy, right? Well, yes, we do need a certain amount of omega-6s in our body because, again, the inflammatory response is a natural process. However, what we currently have in our diet is an over amount of omega-6s to the ratio of omega-3s, and that's one of the biggest things driving up inflammation from our diet. So what we want to do is reduce, if not avoid, the processed seed oils and opt for whole foods. All right, so as we wrap up, I want you to know that your weight on the scale is a measure of poor health, which is what I learned all those years ago when I did the Whole30 and lost 12 inches, but only lost half a pound. Inflammation might seem invisible, but it is actually measurable based on how you feel and on some of your blood work markers as well. So if you are somebody who wants to perform better, you want to have higher energy, and maybe you have some weight to lose, I highly encourage you to get tested and do an assessment to see what are your true risks for inflammation at the moment. And you can do that by reaching out and booking a 30-minute health strategy call directly with me. We'll get all your questions answered, and I'll tell you if you're a good fit or not. All right, my friends, if you found this episode helpful, leave a 5-star review on whichever platform you're listening this to, and I would really appreciate it. And if you do, I will send you my bonus guide on reducing inflammation. All you have to do is send me a screenshot of that 5-star review and email it to me at Caitlin@feelgreatwithkate.com. Caitlin is spelled Kaitlin at feelgreatwithkate, spelled Kait. All right, until next time, my friends, stay healthy. Just a reminder that the information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended to be medical advice. It should not be used to treat, diagnose, or cure any medical condition. Always consult your physician or qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your health regimen or medications. Caitlin Bornkamp and Health Supply LLC, DBA Feel Great with Kate disclaim any liability for outcomes resulting from the use of this content.